Welcome. Thank you very much for tuning in today. We really appreciate you. It's called Being 40 Show at 40. Frank Mola and Venus Chengo. Asante Nisana. Thank you where you are, where you're seated, be from your phone, from your living room. Asante kwa nasileo. Now, a very interesting topic today. We're talking about co-parenting. There are very many definitions of co-parenting out there. Co-parenting can be two married people or a married couple who separated, they were married. It can be people who are not married, but you had a child. It can be, co-parent can also be more than one person. It doesn't have to be the people who are married and then they separated. You separated, you went ahead and got married to other people, and it becomes bigger and bigger. There's good co-parenting, there's toxic co-parenting. There are different ways of doing this, right? At 40, some of us have gone through this, some of us are co-parenting at this point in time. So we're just willing to share with you what we feel about co-parenting. So Venus, what do you think about co-parenting?
Just to add on to your definition,
yes.
You can co-parent a child who is not your own. Okay, because we have
that's true.
We actually have people who adopt children, either from maybe a relative who maybe has transitioned.
Okay.
And during our days, we used to go through co-parenting.
What's your days?
Those days, these are siku zetu za kuchapwa na nini slippers. We used to go through co-parenting. And why do I say this? A lot of the times during our teenager, and I know you so well, so don't try to nini yourself, justify yourself here. Of course, we used to get into trouble and we'd be beaten and we'd get angry with our parents, and then we would maybe want to go and live with someone else.
Away,
So the person you went to took that role of co-parenting.
For that moment.
Just for our viewers, co-parenting is just not about people who have separated or, it is actually a choice to bring up a child.
Okay.
Bring up a child, as a parent.
It doesn't have to be your blood.
It doesn't have to be your blood. So I have personally been co-parented because Nkwanga kichwa ngumu. I was
I know.
Yes. Yeah, but I don't look it. And I really advocate, in this day and age, I actually advocate for co-parenting, especially for parents who are handling teenagers.
Yeah.
But besides that, Frank, when we come now to the central, the definition, in psychology we say co-parenting ni ile yani people have separated and, Ebu share your experience, because I've watched you come here with, your two sons, mara sijui saa zingine na kupigia simu, unapika, Let's just be authentic. How does it work out for you?
I mean, it's how do I start? So for my firstborn, basically, right? And co-parenting is not an easy thing, I'll tell you that. Because people have to lower their pride. You have to make a lot of sacrifices. And for me, I think one of the things which I'll always sit back and say is the man tends to play a very major role. And I'm looking at this from my own lenses because one, I would travel so much. And then two, there is a young man who's living with the mother, living with the grandparents at the same time. So co-parenting doesn't just have to be, to your point, the people who are separated. Because you can get a child be raised by the mom, by the grandparents, by the father, and by the grandparents on the other side. So there are very many people around this child. And for me, that is what I experienced. And I always say Jeremy was very lucky because, he had me, he had the mom, he had the mom's husband, he had the grandparents on the other side. Now, when it comes to decision making, communication has to be constant,
correct,
and consistent, right? You don't have to talk all the time. You don't have to keep on reaching out to your, partner and saying no. It's precise, concise. Is it fees? It's already clear. This is fees that is being paid. Which school is a child going to? And I tell you, most of the decisions, I would leave it for the mother to make the decisions.
Okay.
And you had to really swallow a humble pie in certain instances for that unity to go through.
Okay.
But I tell you, it is not an easy thing, all right? Now, you're in a situation whereby I'm co-parenting this Jeremy with, there's a mom, and then you have another boy who also the mom is different, right? So that even makes it bigger.
Yeah.
Because the question here is, you have all these boys with you, they have different parents, how do you co-parent? And now take it to the next step where you get married. Now a third person comes in who meets these boys, and then probably the third person also comes in with another child. Right? And the puzzle keeps on growing. Now, it calls for you to sit back, and you must be deliberate about it, because it's not an easy task. One, a lot of responsibility has to shift. You need to make sure that this child is not feeling more loved than the other child on one side, so that the other side where the mother is, there are no complaints like, you know what, Frank, maybe so-and-so is feeling more loved than the other person. It's not been an easy journey, but I've been deliberate about it.
Wow.
Very deliberate.
And do you feel, Frank, I'm more inclined to the issue of conflict. Because in my practice, I realize that most couples who come in cases where they are co-parenting, you find that communication and all these things, they're not happening the way they should, So you find that there's a lot of conflict, and and issues of control.
Yes.
Whereby a certain parent wants to over control children, or one of them is even bad mouthing the other. The partner.
The other partner,
Have you experienced this in your own experience?
As a person, I've experienced, and I have people around me who have experienced the same. That happens. Whenever that separation is happening, there's always bitterness. And depending on why the separation is happening. Is it happening because you just fell apart? Is it happening because one spouse is cheating? Is it happening because one spouse has moved and is going to work in a different country or something like that? It happens. Now, conflict, and I'll tell you, for me, what used to happen is, in the event there's conflict, I would always go to the parents. Either my parents or to the parents on the other side.
Okay.
And we'd have to sit down and get a solution. And I'm telling you, this is not, I'm not saying this just for TV. This is what I used to do. And that is how Jeremy, at 15 years old now, has grown up knowing he's been raised by a lot of people. But it took a lot of courage, a lot of sacrifice, and sometimes you don't have to invite yourself in every conflict you're called upon. If you see this is going this direction, you don't have to participate in that fight. You have a choice, right? Now, there is that. The other one that I see is where there's money involved. One parent feels like, I have the money, and the other one who doesn't have, be it the male or the female, either way, you'll see there's a level of dominance. I want my child to go to this school. Why? Because I have the money, and you don't have, so the child has to move, right? But you're not involving the person in decision making. You're not at all. I mean, Jeremy is transitioning school right now. I'm taking him from 844 to a different system.
Okay.
Why? It's just because COVID happening, guys are going to repeat and everything else. But I had to involve the relevant parties into the conversation. I had to come back and tell these guys, you know what? Let's discuss. This is what I think. What do you think as a mother? What do you think as a grandfather? And the decision was made unanimous.
Awesome.
Right?
Awesome.
But you have situations where the lady is earning more and she wants to control because the man is not earning enough. The important thing for me is, it's usually not how much money you have.
Yes.
It is about what you use with what you have.
It's very true.
Don't use the money to control. And I see a lot of people doing that. Conflicts come in because I have more than you have. I'm capable. I'm financially able. You're not financially able, so I'm going to control you. Remember, as you co-parent, if you have a child, sometimes I always say, if your wife or your ex is the one with the children, upkeep. Let me tell you, Venus, as long as you're split or separated or divorced, and your wife has, or your spouse, or you name it, does not have the resources, be it a house, be it a job, my friends, you need to support. Give a monthly stipend. Do something, right? Because these are your children.
Exactly.
At the end of the day.
I like that.
These
I
are your
like
children.
that. And I think that is part of being humble, for lack of a better word, because truly it only takes a man with that kind of wisdom to know that if they're supporting the mother, then they're supporting the child directly.
Yes, automatically.
Yes.
You
But-
can't, because how else do you transfer money?
Yes. Because they're guys I've met and they're like, no, I want to, they're finding other means, not even through the mother.
Yeah.
And yet this was your wife. This was your partner. So I feel that part of co-parenting calls for forgiveness because there's a past, and that bitterness can actually come in between and affect how your child processes issues about relationship. There are those kids who have watched their parents fight because of them,
Yes.
and they decide, I will never get married. Or
Yes.
they decide to switch their own, perceptions about sexuality.
Yes. We say what? Monkey do? They say what? Monkey something, monkey do. Monkey do, monkey
monkey
what?
say monkey do.
It's a way, what the monkey, kids are always, they're reluctant when you give them advice and tell them, don't do this. They'll always copy what
Copy
you do.
you. It's called mirroring, actually.
Yes, they'll
Yeah.
always copy.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of parents use kids for conflict resolution. Because I cannot get to the father. Let me get through this child. The father will see the child is suffering. Because I cannot be able to get her attention. Let me do this to the child. The father will get attention. And that's why you see a number of times a child is tattered, a child is all these things, and somebody is saying, "Si baba yake yuko." I cannot struggle and the father is there. So using a child, an innocent soul that was not there when two of you were meeting, and then now you bring your anger and say, "I'll not do it because the father is busy doing whatever outside." No. The consensus has to be, it's for the benefit of the child.
Exactly.
Every other thing needs to sit aside.
And do you feel, because there's also the issue of values. Now that you've moved on as Frank, you see, and Jeremy's mom, or in the context of someone else, where the partner has also moved on and probably even gotten married. Okay, the issue of values. There's a way when you are together, you are bringing up these children. Have you faced challenges when it comes to values? Because part of the growth curve means that we acquire maybe new standards, lower,
It's
or
true.
have you faced that as a challenge?
I think, and the beauty of this again is this. I mean, Jeremy and, I didn't ask him permission to have this conversation, but Jeremy, don't worry. It's all in the best interest. Jeremy was raised in a family where they're very religious.
Okay.
Extremely religious.
Wow.
The mom is a pastor. The stepdad is a pastor. The grandparents are very religious and church-going people. So Jeremy every Sunday would have to go to church, regardless. And that's one thing I would never compromise.
Okay.
Never, ever. And if I wanted to see him, I have to go to church after the service to pick him up. Every Sunday.
Wow, I love
every
that.
other Sunday. Right? So that is one. Number two, whenever Jeremy would do something on this other side, I would have to tell the mom, this is what is happening. On the other side, the mom would tell me, Frank, when you're with Jeremy, watch out on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because I noticed this. That communication has to be there. But let me tell you the flip side of that as well, is my communication is not constant with Jeremy's mom. My communication is constant with the spouse, because I have to give the husband respect, because he is the head of that house.
Yes.
So I need to talk to him if I need anything in regards to Jeremy. Then he will know how to do that in and within his family.
Impressive.
That way, you let somebody be a leader in their family. That way, you give them the space and the freedom and everything else. It's not an easy thing, like I told you.
Okay.
A number of people would ask me, but Frank, how? There's a friend of mine who said, it's either you raise my child or I raise my child.
Yes.
There's no in between. Usiniambie unakaa na mtoto, I need to send you money. No. You stay with the kid and do everything. Or I stay with the kid
over,
and I do everything. There's no in between. Let me tell you, what you're doing because of your ego is affecting the child.
Very true, and I agree.
Because they know. So There's a tough balancing acting with it, but
And did you
have
learn
to,
over time? Because you seem to be in this space where there's a lot. I mean, you've perfected the art of co-parenting. Is it something that you learned over time through the experiences, or is it that you are very, very intentional about co-parenting?
I'll tell you, because you find yourself when you bring a life into this world. There's a responsibility. The plan was not for you to separate, but you separate, and then every other things, everything else happens. Now, you have a choice. For me, because I read a lot, extensively and all that, it has helped shape my thinking.
Okay.
The exposure I've had and the number of people, the seminars I've attended, the mentorships I've gone through, the counselings I've done. I advocate for counseling, guys. I mean, as much as some people feel it's expensive and everything else, I do advocate for counseling. It helps me. But in addition, the grandparents on both sides, they played a critical role. This takes me to this book called The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. When you read that book and the story of that child, the shepherd, and how he was looking for his treasure, and he had to leave from Spain coming into Africa, and the hurdles he had to go through. And then sometimes you come and realize we go so far to look for something, and sometimes it can just be on our doorsteps. Right? Co-parenting. We don't need to go and look for, I don't know who to come in. It starts with your inner self. It starts with your acceptance. It starts with you sitting back and saying, this is my child. And this is the vision I'd want for my child to have. You don't need to go outside for somebody to look that. And what I like about Paulo is telling the story of that shepherd. He was very intentional. He did not know what lies ahead, but he kept on going. The same thing with co-parenting. You might not know your child is going to the other family. Just sit back and say, as a parent, this is what I'm going to do. But don't limit because of pride and feeling like, no, it has to happen my way. Don't.
Wow, I love that. And conclusively, I think, Frank, what you're bringing out is commitment in terms of being very intentional about parenting, having the same values whereby, everything is laid down, this is how I want to bring this child. So it's almost automated on how this child will be brought up. If he steals, he has to be beaten. Having the same kind of standards, whether he's here or in, the other side, the parenting style remains the same, okay? And I think another thing that you've really brought out is remaining humble as you do this, because sometimes it can be very humiliating having to deal with the various support systems or the extended family and having various perceptions being brought out, you see, because there are those people who feel you failed as a father. What is this you're trying to tell us about co-parenting? So that you have really, I thank you so much for just allowing us into your space. You really brought it out so well. I've also learned so much from you. So for our viewers, this is Being 40. Today we're talking about co-parenting. And I think, Frank, we cut you short. Maybe, as our producer always says, don't say this, but I think we need to pick up on this later. If you're in that space and you have questions for us, of course, in our 40s we handle things very differently. I have not really done that, like from how would I say it? Like Frank, Frank is in that space currently. But for me, it's more of an extended kind of version of co-parenting. But please feel free to share, subscribe, like our page, but mostly give us feedback, ask us questions. Yeah, we are here, we will answer them as is. As we say, we want to be as authentic as we can. We want to share our personal space with you. So once again, this is Being 40.
Yeah, guys, and I mean, co-parenting, like you said, it's not an easy task. A number of you are experiencing different things out there. Some people are saying an absent dad, an absent mom, and what do I do and everything else. It just calls for them to be very deliberate and very intentional at the same time. I mean, I'll tell you, even though we are closing this up, is we have situations where you're co-parenting, you have one of your child or one child of yours is with the mother. The mother of the child has other kids. Even if you're the one who has the money, be it the man or be it the lady who has the money, you need to go a level lower and find out your child, even if you want to give him the best, but he still has to go back to a different family where maybe they might not be in a position to. You can take some sacrifices, some concessions and everything else. Don't compete. But eventually, remember the values you instill in that child is what is very, very critical. And values instilled in one family, when the child comes to you, should also align with the values on the other side. Others, what you're doing is what? You're confusing that child. So leave communication channels open. It doesn't have to be throughout. Leave the channels open for the benefit of that life that the two of you came together and decided we want to have a child. The child was not there when you made that decision. It's about being 40, guys. And remember, at the stage of where you are, we are sharing this experience because at 40, I've seen it all, I've done it, and I'm living it now. I'm co-parenting, all right? You have a different story, you have a different narrative, how you do it. That is fine. This is how we do it. And there's more we can also share. It doesn't make our story right. It doesn't neither make it wrong, because our right is not the only right.
Exactly.
Thank you very much for watching Being 40. It's all about co-parenting. Until next time, cheers.
Keep it locked. Hi guys, this is Being 40 and this is the Mind Spa moment where we talk about psychological facts. Now today we've been talking about co-parenting and being in that space. I'm not in that space, but I have done it, from an extended kind of approach, okay? And one thing that I have realized, even in the space of seeing clients coming in for counseling and handling issues of co-parenting, one thing that I would like to really emphasize is having or presenting a united front when you're handling children, okay? This has to do with your parenting styles. A lot of times you find that based on your personality, you'll have the authoritative approach, and someone else will want a laissez-faire, kind of approach when handling the children. This, of course, creates conflict, where you find children preferring either the dad or the mom, okay? So unity remains very, very key when you're co-parenting. If you go for authoritative parenting styles, please make sure you maintain that so that your children are able to be molded in a particular direction. Away from that, what you're giving the children is a lot of confusion as well as resentment, because the questions that you're likely to hear from your children is, why did you guys have to separate? What did mom do to dad so that you guys had to live apart? So issues to do with family are very, very sensitive. And I don't blame anyone because of maybe, walking away from their marriage or going through a divorce. But the thing is, you have to be very, very intentional, because when you're having the conflict, as my co-host Frank says, the children were not there, okay? So do not stretch and do not affect their livelihood by bringing your own conflict into the whole scenario, okay? So please, from a psychological point of advice, always remain united. Forget about the bile that you have. When it comes to your children, be very, very intentional and stay committed to the process. Once again, this is the Mind Spa moment, and this is Being 40.
Hello, how are you? And thank you for tuning in Being 40, and thank you for watching. We really appreciate you. Frank Mola here with Brutal Facts. We are talking about co-parenting. I've narrated to you my personal story. I've allowed myself to be vulnerable, and that's just what it is, guys. it's not rocket science. But allow me to focus a bit on co-parenting when you have a difficult partner or when you have a difficult ex, And these are some of the things that, again, I would really recommend or, advocate for. I'm not a marriage counselor. I don't claim to have monopoly of knowledge as well, but I can share with you one or two things. Number one, when you're dealing with a difficult partner, you need to set boundaries, because children need consistency, right? The boundaries have to be clear, because children must have that consistency, guys. So if it is between the two of you, try and see how those boundaries are being set for the benefit of the children. Number 2, do not criticize your co-parent in front of your child, because what you're doing to that child is not really fair. And you see it's going to turn up and it's going to affect you at some point. Number 3, as much as it's difficult, try and be a team. For the benefit of that child, try and be a team. Number 4, just focus on your child's needs. You've gone separate ways, just try and focus on your child's needs. This is what is important for now. Number 5, if you can, as you're talking on the phone with your partner and you're calling him names and your child is there, try and see if you can manage that, okay? Don't really be all over the phone insulting each other and your child is there. Try and get a quiet place and get to exchange with your partner. Number 6, just don't expect too much, honestly. Don't expect too much from the other partner. Sit back and agree and see what is feasible, what is achievable, what can be done, but don't have very high expectations. And then if all becomes so tough, guys, look for a support system. I don't know which support system you'd want to, be it friends, be it families, be it parents. Look for a support system, be it counseling, be it mentorship, and it's all for the benefit of that child. And lastly, if it cannot, all these points cannot work, go and settle matters in court. Ideally, I would not advocate for that because you're dragging the child, but there's some circumstances where you cannot do it by yourself and you have to take it to the system so that the system can decide and say who stays with the child, how do you stay with the child, when do you get to pick up the child. If you get to that point, by all means, go ahead and do it. To summarize and to close it, remember to put your 10-10-10 into all this. How do you do that? Before you pick up that phone, before you use your child as a messenger, before you insult your spouse in front of your child, do your 10-10-10 and ask yourself, in the next 10 seconds, in the next 10 minutes, in the next 10 hours, in the next 10 days, in the next 10 weeks, in the next 10 months, in the next 10 years, how will your child turn out to be with all the toxicity you are putting into him or her now? Being 40, it's all about brutal facts, guys. My right is not the only right. I'm just telling you my story. And remember, I don't claim monopoly of knowledge. I'd love to hear from you as well. Thank you.
Like John Cena, some man I get buff like John Cena. We used to be cool when I used to come through. Now you wanna act tough like John Cena. G hyper. G. Some gala want beef like hyena. Some gala get beat, I'm Serena. The gala get loud, the gala get wild. Some gala take shots like tequila. Hyper. Unajifanya mwalimu wangu labda we ni Nyerere. Nanfundisha kutulia labda huna kelele. Takareka na Belinda hata mimi mwenyewe. Ungependa situlia kati we unaenda mbele. Lakini mimi nimekupenda though. I don't know why you treat me like a criminal. Eish, we were just together though. On the same line, why presidential though? Some man I act rough like John Cena. Some man I get buff like John Cena. He used to be cool when I used to come through. Now you wanna act tough like John Cena. Hey, Some gala want beef like hyena. Some gala get beat like Serena. Hey, ha, hey. Some gala take shots like tequila. Get it down. Hey, bo, Hey, alright, T-Boy the flame. DJ Exit. You guys did a lot here. No, it's too much. Kwanza, cheza kama we hutaki.